My name is Ashley. I'm 27 years old, and I almost died from a shellfish allergy when I was 7. You'd think after 20 years, my own family would remember something that nearly killed me, right? Wrong. Last Thanksgiving, my mother Amanda looked me straight in the eye and announced they were serving shrimp as the main course. I've been allergic my entire life. That's when I realized my family cared more about their dinner plans than my actual survival. So I walked out and took every single bag of groceries I'd brought with me. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from and if you or anyone you know has dealt with food allergies that family members just don't take seriously. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, this story gets wild. I was genuinely excited about this trip home to Cleveland. After 6 months of working remotely from my tiny Seattle apartment, I couldn't wait to see my childhood home again. The autumn leaves were perfect, painting the suburban streets in brilliant oranges and reds that reminded me why I'd always loved fall in Ohio. David, my boyfriend of 8 months, was driving while I navigated from the passenger seat. He'd been incredibly supportive when I'd made the leap from my corporate marketing job to freelance graphic design. While my income was still unpredictable, he never made me feel bad about splitting dinner bills or staying in for movie nights instead of expensive dates. His calm, steady presence had become my anchor during all the uncertainty of building my own business. "Tell me again about your family," David said, glancing over at me with that gentle smile that made my heart skip. "I want to make sure I don't accidentally say something wrong." I launched into stories about growing up in our beautiful colonial house with its wraparound porch and massive oak tree in the backyard. I told him about family game nights where we'd stay up until midnight playing Monopoly, and how my mother Amanda used to make special allergy-friendly versions of every holiday dish just for me. She'd been so careful, reading every label, calling manufacturers to double-check ingredients. When other kids' parents sent birthday cupcakes to school, Amanda would pack me special treats so I never felt left out. My sister Emily had always been my closest confidant. Even though she was 3 years younger, she'd appointed herself my protector whenever kids at school made fun of my packed lunches or the EpiPen I carried everywhere. Emily would march right up to anyone who called me allergy girl and give them a piece of her mind that left them speechless. "Your family sounds amazing," David said, squeezing my hand. "I can see where you get your kindness from." The back seat and trunk were loaded with groceries I'd carefully selected from Whole Foods that morning. Organic free-range turkey, artisanal cranberry sauce, heirloom vegetables, and a decadent pumpkin pie from the bakery that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. I wanted to contribute something special, to show my family that my new life wasn't just about chasing dreams, but about bringing beautiful things to the people I loved. Emily and I had been texting for weeks about the dinner plans. She was handling the decorations while Amanda coordinated the menu. Dad had promised to break out his famous homemade rolls, the ones that took him 2 days to perfect, but melted in your mouth like clouds of butter and wheat. Even thinking about them made my mouth water. This was going to be David's first real introduction to my family, and I wanted everything to be perfect. I'd told him story after story about our traditions, about how we'd watch the Thanksgiving Day parade while Amanda bustled around the kitchen, how we'd all take turns saying what we were grateful for before digging into the feast. I wanted him to understand that despite choosing to live across the country, family was still the foundation of everything I valued. "I can't wait for you to taste my dad's stuffing," I said, practically bouncing in my seat. "And wait until you see how my mom decorates. She goes all out with these gorgeous autumn centerpieces that look like they belong in a magazine." David chuckled at my enthusiasm. "You're really glowing right now. I love seeing you this happy." I was happy. For the first time in months, everything felt like it was falling into place. My design business was starting to gain traction. I had this wonderful man beside me who supported my dreams, and I was about to share one of my favorite holidays with the people who mattered most. The 6-hour drive had flown by because I spent most of it painting pictures of the warm, loving family dinner waiting for us. As we pulled into the familiar driveway, I felt that rush of nostalgia that comes from returning to the place where you learned what love was supposed to feel like. The front door opened before we'd even finished unloading the car, and Amanda appeared with her arms outstretched for a hug. She looked exactly the same as always, her silver hair perfectly styled and her autumn-themed sweater coordinated with orange jewelry that caught the late afternoon light. "Ashley, honey," she called out, but her embrace felt rushed, distracted. Over her shoulder, I could see her phone buzzing on the hall table, and her eyes kept darting toward it even as she squeezed me. "Mom, this is David," I said, stepping back to make introductions. "David, my mother Amanda." "Mrs. Patterson, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you," David said, extending his hand with that warm, genuine smile that had won over my friends and coworkers back in Seattle. "Ashley talks about you constantly." Amanda shook his hand politely but barely made eye contact. "Nice to meet you too, Derek." "Actually, it's David," he corrected gently, still smiling. "Of course, sorry. I'm just so scattered today with all the cooking." But she was already turning away, reaching for her phone. "Ashley, honey, you can put your things in the guest room. I've made some changes to your old room." I felt the first little prick of disappointment. Amanda had always been meticulous about names and details. She prided herself on remembering everything about everyone, from birthdays to favorite colors to how people liked their coffee. Getting David's name wrong felt strange, but I pushed the feeling aside. We hauled in bag after bag of groceries, and I was excited to show off the beautiful ingredients I'd selected. But as we passed through the kitchen, I noticed the counters were already crowded with unfamiliar packages and containers. The air was thick with a smell that made my stomach turn, a distinctive briny scent that I recognized but didn't want to acknowledge. "Wow, you've really outdone yourself this year," I said, trying to keep my tone light as I set down the organic vegetables. "It smells like you've been cooking all day." Emily appeared in the doorway, and I rushed over to hug my little sister. But she felt tense in my arms, and when I pulled back, her smile seemed forced. "Hey, Ash. How was the drive?" She glanced nervously between me and Amanda, who was now absorbed in her phone again. "Long but good. David's been such a trooper." I brought all your favorite things for tomorrow." I gestured toward the grocery bags. "Remember that cranberry orange bread you loved when we visited that cafe in Chicago? I found the exact recipe online and got all the ingredients." "That's sweet," Emily said, but she didn't sound excited. We might need to talk about the menu. There have been some changes." Dad chose that moment to come thundering down the stairs, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence long before he appeared. James Patterson had always been a larger-than-life personality, the kind of man who filled every room he entered with his booming voice and strong opinions. Well, look who finally decided to visit," he said, and while his tone was jovial, there was an edge underneath that I'd never heard directed at me before. "And she brought a friend." "Dad, this is David, my boyfriend." "David, my father James." David stepped forward confidently, offering his hand. "Mr. Patterson, Ashley's told me so much about you. I understand you're quite the bread maker." Dad shook his hand, but his grip looked unnecessarily firm, and his smile was more like a challenge. "She's told you about me, has she? I wonder what version of the story you got." "Probably the one where we're supposed to be impressed that she's finally bringing someone home after running off to play artist in Seattle." The words hit me like a slap. Dad had always been my biggest cheerleader, the one who encouraged me to follow my dreams even when they seemed impossible. Hearing him dismiss my career as playing artist felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet. "James," Amanda said without looking up from her phone, "be nice." "I am being nice. I'm just curious about this young man who's apparently important enough to drag our daughter across the country for." He looked David up and down appraisingly. "What do you do for work, son?" I'm a software engineer at a tech startup, David replied, his voice steady despite the obvious hostility. I actually think what Ashley's building with her design business is incredibly impressive. Her talent is remarkable. Design business, Dad repeated with a snort. Is that what we're calling it? I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Dad, what's that supposed to mean? Nothing, sweetheart. I'm sure your little hobby is very fulfilling. The word hobby hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I'd been building my client base steadily, working 12-hour days to establish myself in a competitive field. I'd just landed my biggest contract yet, designing branding for a sustainable fashion startup. It wasn't a hobby, it was my career, my passion, my future. David moved slightly closer to me, a subtle show of support that I appreciated more than he could know. But I could see the confusion in his eyes. This wasn't the warm, loving family I'd described during our long drive. Where should we put Ashley's groceries? David asked, clearly trying to change the subject. She brought some beautiful ingredients to contribute to tomorrow's dinner. Amanda finally looked up from her phone, glancing at the bags with what looked almost like annoyance. Oh, you didn't need to bring anything. I've got everything handled. But I wanted to contribute, I said. I got that organic turkey we talked about, and the cranberries from that farm in Washington that Emily said she wanted to try. We're not really doing traditional this year, Amanda said dismissively. I've planned something different. More sophisticated. Emily shot me another one of those worried looks, and suddenly I felt like an outsider in my own childhood home. The excitement I'd felt during the car ride was rapidly deflating, replaced by a growing sense that I'd somehow missed an important memo about how this visit was supposed to go. Let me show you to the guest room, Emily said quickly, grabbing one of our suitcases. You must be tired from the drive. As we climbed the familiar stairs, I noticed the framed photos that had lined the walls for years. Pictures of family vacations, school achievements, holidays together. But as we passed, I realized something was missing. The photos were still there, but many of them seemed to be from before I'd moved to Seattle. Recent pictures, the ones I'd sent of my new apartment, my art shows, my adventures exploring the Pacific Northwest, were nowhere to be seen. Here's your room, Emily said, opening the door to what used to be the guest room, but was now clearly a permanent living space. I hope you'll be comfortable. What about my old room? I asked, even though I already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Emily winced. Mom's turned it into her craft room. She's really gotten into scrapbooking and jewelry making. She needed the space for all her supplies. My childhood bedroom, with its pale yellow walls and the window seat where I'd spent countless hours reading, had been erased. Replaced by Amanda's new hobbies, as if 20 years of my life in that house had been neatly packaged away to make room for more important things. David set down our bags and immediately wrapped his arms around me from behind, sensing my distress. The room is lovely, he said to Emily, though I could hear the careful diplomacy in his voice. Thank you for accommodating us. As Emily left us alone to settle in, I sank onto the guest bed and finally let myself acknowledge what I'd been trying to ignore. Something was very wrong here, and the family dinner I'd been anticipating for months was already starting to feel like a mistake. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of voices drifting up from the kitchen. David was still sleeping, his arm draped protectively across my waist, and for a moment I just listened to the familiar rhythm of my family preparing for a big meal. It almost felt normal, like the strange tension from yesterday had been my imagination. But as I crept downstairs in my pajamas, hoping to help with breakfast and recapture some of that old closeness with Amanda, I caught fragments of conversation that made me freeze on the bottom step. She just waltzed in here with all those fancy groceries, like she's showing off, Amanda was saying to someone on the phone. As if we don't know how to cook a proper meal without her expensive ingredients. Who's she talking to? I wondered, but then Emily's voice answered my unspoken question. Mom, that's not fair. Ashley was just trying to contribute. You know how she is about wanting to help. Help? Amanda laughed, but it wasn't a warm sound. "Emily, sweetie, your sister stopped wanting to help this family the day she decided we weren't good enough for her anymore. Running off to Seattle, like she couldn't wait to get away from us." The words felt like ice water in my veins. I pressed myself against the wall, knowing I shouldn't eavesdrop, but unable to move. "That's not why she moved," Emily protested. "She got that job opportunity, and then she wanted to try freelancing. It's not about us, isn't it?" Dad's voice joined the conversation. 27 years old, and she's still playing dress-up, calling herself an entrepreneur. Meanwhile, she drags home some stranger and expects us to pretend he's family. "David seems nice," Emily said weakly. "David seems like he's humoring her," Amanda replied. "Mark my words, once he realizes what she's really like, how selfish and dramatic she can be, he'll be gone faster than you can say Seattle." I had to grip the banister to keep from stumbling. Selfish? Dramatic? These were words I'd never heard associated with myself, especially not from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. "Remember when she was little and used to fake those stomachaches to get out of family events?" Dad continued. "Always had to be the center of attention, always had some crisis that meant the world had to revolve around her." "The allergies aren't fake," Emily said firmly, and I felt a rush of gratitude for my sister's defense. "Of course they're not fake," Amanda said impatiently. "But the way she milks them for sympathy makes everyone walk on eggshells around her. Do you know how exhausting it's been, having to plan every meal around Ashley's restrictions for 20 years? My throat closed up. Every carefully planned family dinner, every time Amanda had called restaurants ahead of time to check ingredients, every special dish she'd made just for me. I'd thought it was love. She'd made it feel like love. But apparently, it had been a burden all along. "I think we should tell her," Emily said quietly. "About Connor coming tonight." Connor. My ex-boyfriend from college. We'd dated for 2 years before I'd realized we wanted completely different things from life. He'd wanted marriage, kids, and a traditional suburban existence by the time we were 25. I'd wanted to explore the world, build a career, figure out who I was outside of other people's expectations. We'd broken up amicably when I'd moved to Seattle, promising to stay friends, but gradually losing touch as our lives took different directions. Why would Connor be coming to Thanksgiving dinner? I whispered to myself. "It'll be good for her to see what she gave up," Amanda was saying. "Connor's doing so well now. He's got that promotion at the bank, bought that beautiful house in Westlake. He's ready to settle down with the right kind of woman. Mom, Ashley has a boyfriend. She brought him here to meet us." "That Seattle boy? Please." "Ashley's going through a phase, Emily. She always has. First it was that theater obsession in high school, then the art classes in college, now this design fantasy. She'll come back to reality eventually, and when she does, she'll need good people like Connor waiting for her." I felt like I was drowning. My family hadn't just dismissed my career and my relationship. They'd apparently been planning some kind of intervention disguised as a holiday dinner. The groceries I'd brought, the excitement I'd felt about sharing my new life with them, David's nervous preparation to make a good impression. None of it mattered because they'd already decided my life was a mistake that needed correcting. Besides, Dad added, Connor's family has always been good to us. His father helped me with that legal issue last year, remember? It's the least we can do to include him in our family gathering. Legal issue? I didn't know anything about Dad needing legal help. How much had I missed by living across the country? How many family crises had they navigated without even mentioning them to me? "What are we serving for dinner?" Emily asked, and I held my breath for the answer. "I planned something special," Amanda said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. "Lobster tails and jumbo shrimp with that garlic butter sauce Connor loves." I know it's not traditional, but I wanted to do something elegant. Something that shows we've evolved beyond boring turkey dinners. The bottom dropped out of my world. Shellfish. She was planning to serve shellfish as the main course of our family Thanksgiving dinner. The same shellfish that had sent me to the emergency room when I was 7, that I carried an EpiPen for, that had shaped 20 years of careful meal planning and ingredient checking. Emily's voice was sharp with alarm. Mom, you can't serve shellfish. Ashley's allergic, remember? She could die. Oh, Emily, don't be so dramatic. Ashley can eat the side dishes. There will be plenty for her to choose from. She's not going to die from being in the same room as shrimp. But that wasn't true. My allergy was severe enough that sometimes even the smell or airborne particles could trigger a reaction. Amanda knew this. She'd been the one holding my hand in the hospital all those years ago, watching me struggle to breathe while doctors pumped me full of epinephrine and antihistamines. This is insane, Emily said, her voice rising. You're planning a dinner that could literally kill your daughter, and you're talking about it like she's being picky about vegetables. Your sister has made her choices, Dad said coldly. She chose to move across the country. She chose to abandon her family for some fantasy life. She chose to bring a stranger to our family dinner. Maybe it's time she learned that choices have consequences. I couldn't listen anymore. My legs were shaking as I crept back upstairs, my heart pounding so hard I was sure David would wake up. But he was still sleeping peacefully, unaware that the family he'd driven 6 hours to meet had spent the morning discussing how to teach me a lesson about loyalty and life choices. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands and trying to process what I'd just heard. My family didn't just disapprove of my life, they actively resented it. They saw my career as a joke, my relationship as temporary, and my allergies as an inconvenience they'd endured long enough. The dinner wasn't a celebration of family, it was an ambush designed to force me back into a life I'd never wanted. And the worst part was, I'd walked right into it, carrying bags of groceries like an offering to people who saw my love as a burden they couldn't wait to be rid of. By 4 o'clock, the house was filled with the sounds and smells of dinner preparation, but my stomach was churning with anxiety rather than hunger. David had spent the afternoon trying to engage with my family, offering to help in the kitchen, asking Dad about his work, complimenting Amanda on her decorations. But every attempt at connection was met with polite disinterest at best, barely concealed hostility at worst. I'd managed to pull Emily aside and ask her directly about Connor, hoping she'd tell me it was all a misunderstanding. Instead, she'd confirmed my worst fears with an apologetic whisper. Mom invited him last week. She said it would be good for the family to reconnect with him, and that maybe seeing him would help you remember what you're missing back home. Emily's eyes were filled with guilt and worry. I tried to talk her out of it, Ash. I really did, but you know how she gets when she's made up her mind about something. And the shellfish? I'd asked, though I already knew the answer. She insists you're being overdramatic about the allergy. She thinks you use it to control family gatherings and get attention. Emily's voice was barely audible. I've tried explaining how serious it is, but she just gets angry and says I'm enabling you. Now, as I sat in the living room pretending to watch football with David and Dad, I felt like I was waiting for an execution. The smell of cooking seafood was getting stronger, and I could already feel the tightness in my chest that usually preceded a reaction. I'd taken 2 antihistamines preemptively, but I knew they wouldn't be enough if I was exposed to shellfish directly. Ashley, honey, could you come help me in the kitchen for a minute? Amanda called out, her voice sweet as pie. David squeezed my hand encouragingly. Want me to come with you? No, it's fine, I lied, not wanting him to witness whatever confrontation was brewing. I found Amanda standing over the stove, stirring a large pot of what looked like melted butter mixed with garlic and herbs. The lobster tails were arranged on a baking sheet, their shells bright red and glistening. Jumbo shrimp were piled on another platter, and the smell was overwhelming even from across the room. What do you think? She asked proudly, gesturing at her seafood feast. Isn't it gorgeous? Much more sophisticated than the same old turkey and stuffing. Mom, I said carefully, you know I can't eat any of this, right? The shellfish allergy. Oh, Ashley, stop being so dramatic. She waved a butter-covered spoon dismissively. You can fill up on the side dishes. I made plenty of options for you. It's not about having other options. I can't even be in the same room when this is being served. The smell alone is starting to affect me. My voice was getting tighter, and I could feel my throat beginning to constrict slightly. Amanda turned to face me fully, and for the first time all weekend, I had her complete attention. But the look in her eyes wasn't concern, it was irritation. Ashley Marie, I have spent 20 years tiptoeing around your allergies. 20 years of reading every label, calling every restaurant, making special dishes just for you. I am tired of planning my life around your restrictions. The formal use of my middle name sent chills down my spine. Amanda only did that when she was truly angry, when she'd reached the end of her patience and was about to deliver a verdict I wouldn't like. This isn't about restrictions, I said, my breathing becoming more labored. This is about my safety. About not dying at the dinner table. You're not going to die from being dramatic, she snapped. You know what I think? I think you've been milking this allergy for sympathy your entire life. Poor Ashley, who can't eat the same food as everyone else. Poor Ashley, who needs special treatment and constant attention. The words hit me like physical blows. Milking it? Mom, I almost died when I was 7. You were there. You saw what happened. I saw a scared little girl who learned that having a medical crisis meant everyone would stop what they were doing and focus on her. And I've watched you use that lesson ever since. That's when I heard the front door open, followed by a familiar laugh that made my blood run cold. Connor's voice carried into the kitchen as Dad greeted him warmly, welcoming him like a member of the family. Surprise, Amanda said brightly, as if she hadn't just accused me of faking a life-threatening medical condition. I invited Connor to join us. I thought it would be lovely to have him back at our family table. Connor appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking exactly like the successful banker my family apparently thought I should have married. His suit was perfectly tailored, his smile confident, and his eyes held a mixture of sympathy and superiority that made me want to scream. Ashley, he said warmly, moving in for a hug I desperately didn't want. You look different. Seattle must be treating you well. I stepped back before he could embrace me, very aware that David was probably wondering why another man was hugging his girlfriend in her childhood kitchen. Connor. This is unexpected. Your mom thought it would be nice for us to catch up. I've been worried about you, honestly. This whole freelance thing sounds so unstable. So risky. He glanced around the kitchen, taking in the seafood preparation. I hope you've outgrown that allergy drama. This looks incredible, Mrs. Patterson. Allergy drama. As if my medical condition was a personality flaw I should have overcome by now. Actually, I haven't outgrown anything, I said firmly. And I need to go take my emergency medication because the shellfish smell is already affecting me. Ashley, Amanda said in that warning tone I remembered from childhood, do not make a scene. I'm not making a scene. I'm trying not to have an allergic reaction. We're serving shrimp and lobster as the main course, Amanda announced, as if she was sharing wonderful news. It's time this family stopped arranging our lives around your limitations. The room went completely silent. Connor looked uncomfortable for the first time since he'd arrived. Even he understood that what Amanda had just said was beyond the pale. You're serving the one food that could kill me, I said slowly, on purpose. I'm serving a beautiful dinner that normal people can enjoy, she replied coldly. If you choose to make it about your medical issues, that's your decision. That's when David appeared in the doorway, having clearly sensed something was wrong. He took one look at my face, which was probably flushed and panicked, and immediately moved to my side. Ashley, are you okay? You look like you're having trouble breathing. We need to go, I said quietly. Right now. Go. Amanda's voice rose to a shriek. Ashley, we're about to serve dinner. Connor drove all the way here to see you. The family is finally together. The family that planned a dinner designed to poison me? I turned to Connor, who was studying his shoes. Did you know about this? About the shellfish. His silence was answer enough. Oh my God, I breathed. You all planned this together. This isn't a family dinner. This is some kind of intervention where you try to force me back into the life you think I should be living. Ashley, Dad said, appearing behind Connor, you're being hysterical. I'm being hysterical because my family is trying to kill me. My voice cracked on the last word, and I could feel tears of rage and betrayal burning behind my eyes. Emily rushed into the kitchen, took one look at the scene, and immediately understood what was happening. Mom, this is insane. Ashley's right to be upset. Stay out of this, Emily, Amanda warned. This is between Ashley and reality. David stepped forward, his voice calm but ice cold. I'm sorry, but did you just say you're serving food that you know could cause your daughter to have a life-threatening allergic reaction? I said we're serving a normal dinner and Ashley can choose whether or not to make it about her problems, Amanda replied haughtily. Her problems? David's composure cracked slightly. You mean her potentially fatal medical condition that you're deliberately triggering? And who are you exactly? Dad demanded. You've been dating our daughter for what, 5 minutes? Don't lecture us about family dynamics you don't understand. That's when Connor decided to add his unwanted opinion. Ashley's always been prone to exaggeration. I'm sure she can manage one dinner without making everything about her allergies. David turned to stare at Connor like he'd grown a second head. I'm sorry, who are you and why are you commenting on my girlfriend's medical condition? I'm someone who actually knows Ashley, Connor replied smugly. Someone who was there before she decided to run off and play artist in Seattle. The contempt in his voice when he said play artist was the final straw. Something inside me snapped, and suddenly I wasn't the scared, confused daughter who'd been trying to make sense of my family's behavior. I was a grown woman who'd built a life I was proud of, who deserved basic respect and consideration, who refused to be treated like a burden or a problem to be solved. You know what? I said, my voice suddenly steady and clear. You're absolutely right. I do have a choice here. And I choose not to stay in a house where my own family has planned a dinner that could kill me just to prove some point about my life choices. Ashley, Amanda started, but I held up my hand. No. I'm done. David, we're leaving. Right now. Where do you think you're going? Dad demanded. Anywhere but here, I replied, and for the first time all weekend, I felt completely sure of myself. If you walk out that door, Amanda said, her voice shaking with rage, don't expect to be welcomed back. I looked around the kitchen one more time, at the family I'd driven 6 hours to see, at the man they'd brought to replace my boyfriend, at the dinner that could have sent me to the hospital. And I realized that walking away wasn't a loss. It was the first smart decision I'd made all weekend. I wouldn't dream of coming back, I said. The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. Amanda's face had gone pale, clearly not expecting me to call her bluff. Dad looked thunderstruck, as if the possibility of me actually leaving had never occurred to him. Connor shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing he'd stepped into a family drama that was way more toxic than he'd bargained for. But Emily was nodding, tears streaming down her face. Good for you, Ash, she whispered. Good for you. David, I said, turning to my boyfriend who was watching the whole scene with barely concealed shock. Could you please start loading our suitcases into the car? Of course, he said immediately, his voice gentle but determined. Whatever you need. As he headed upstairs, I turned back to face my family. 27 years of people-pleasing, of trying to earn love that should have been unconditional, of accepting treatment that I would never tolerate from strangers. All of it crystallized into perfect clarity in that moment. I want all of you to listen very carefully, I said, my voice steady and calm in a way that surprised even me. Family is supposed to be about love, support, and basic human decency. Family is supposed to be the people who protect you, who celebrate your successes, who catch you when you fall. Ashley, Dad started, but I wasn't finished. Family is not supposed to deliberately endanger your health to prove a point. Family is not supposed to dismiss your career and your dreams as hobbies and phases. Family is not supposed to invite your ex-boyfriend to ambush you at what's supposed to be a celebration of gratitude. I moved toward the counter where my expensive groceries were still sitting in their Whole Foods bags, completely untouched and clearly unwanted. For 20 years, you made me believe that accommodating my allergies was an act of love. Now I find out it was just a burden you resented carrying. Well, congratulations. You don't have to carry it anymore. I started gathering the grocery bags, and Amanda finally found her voice. What are you doing? Those are for dinner. No, they're not, I replied calmly, lifting the organic turkey that had cost me $80. These are groceries that I bought, with my money, from my successful design business that pays my bills and makes me happy. Since you've made it clear that my contributions aren't welcome here, I'm taking them with me. You can't just take food that was meant for our family dinner, Dad protested. Watch me, I said, grabbing another bag filled with the heirloom vegetables I'd been so excited to share. These groceries are going to feed people who actually appreciate my presence and don't think my existence is an inconvenience. Connor cleared his throat awkwardly. Ashley, maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this rationally. I turned to look at him, this man who dated me for 2 years, but apparently never understood me at all. Connor, with all due respect, you don't get a vote here. You're not my boyfriend. You're not my family. You're just someone my mother invited to remind me of the life I was smart enough to escape. His face flushed red. I was trying to help. Your family is worried about you, Ashley. We all care about what happens to you. If you cared about what happens to me, you wouldn't have agreed to participate in a dinner that could send me to the hospital, I shot back. If you cared about me, you would have respected my decision to move on instead of showing up here like some kind of consolation prize I'm supposed to be grateful for. David reappeared with our luggage, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this man who'd driven 6 hours to meet my family and was now helping me escape from them without a single word of complaint or judgment. I've got our bags, he said quietly. The car's ready whenever you are. I'm almost done, I said, reaching for the artisanal cranberry sauce and the locally sourced honey I'd thought would make such beautiful additions to our family feast. Ashley Marie Patterson, Amanda said, her voice shaking with fury, if you take that food and walk out of this house, you are no longer my daughter. The words should have devastated me. A few hours ago, they would have brought me to my knees, sent me scrambling to apologize and fix whatever was broken between us. But now they felt like a gift, like the final piece of clarity I needed to see this situation for what it really was. Good, I said simply. Because if this is what being your daughter means, I don't want the job anymore. Emily gasped, but I wasn't finished. I had 27 years of swallowed words and suppressed feelings that needed to come out. A real mother wouldn't use her daughter's life-threatening medical condition as a weapon. A real mother would be proud of her daughter's courage to build an independent life instead of resenting her for it. A real mother would want to meet her daughter's boyfriend, not ignore him and invite competition to make him feel unwelcome. How dare you, Amanda breathed. How dare I what? Tell the truth? Stand up for myself? Refuse to let you treat me like garbage in my own family home. I shouldered the last bag of groceries and looked around the kitchen one final time. You know what the saddest part is? I drove 6 hours to get here because I missed you. I brought David because I wanted you to know the person I love. I spent a fortune on groceries because I wanted to contribute something beautiful to our family tradition. Then why are you destroying it? Emily asked through her tears. I'm not destroying anything, Em. I'm just refusing to pretend that poisoning me is an act of love. I walked over and hugged my sister, the only person in this house who'd shown me any genuine concern. You have my number. When you're ready to have a relationship that doesn't involve tolerating abuse, call me. Dad stepped in front of the kitchen door, blocking my exit. Ashley, you're making a huge mistake. Family is everything. Without us, you're just another struggling artist in a city full of dreamers. Without you, I'm a successful businesswoman with people in my life who respect and support me, I corrected. With you, I'm apparently a burden who should be grateful for the privilege of being slowly poisoned at the dinner table. We're not trying to poison you, he insisted. We're trying to help you grow up and stop making everything about yourself. David stepped up beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. Mr. Patterson, with respect, planning a dinner around food that could hospitalize your daughter isn't helping anyone grow up. It's child abuse, and Ashley is brave for refusing to accept it. The simple, clear way he stated the truth cut through all the gaslighting and manipulation like a knife. Yes, this was abuse. Yes, I was brave for refusing to accept it. Yes, I deserved better than this. Get out of my way, Dad, I said firmly. I have groceries to load and a life to get back to. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to physically stop me, but something in my voice, or maybe in David's protective stance beside me, made him step aside. Fine, he said coldly. But don't come crawling back when your little fantasy life falls apart. I won't, I promised, and walked out of that kitchen with my head held high and my arms full of groceries that were going to feed people who actually wanted me around. As we loaded the bags into David's car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The November air was crisp and clean, free of the stifling atmosphere of manipulation and resentment I'd been breathing inside the house. Are you okay? David asked softly as we settled into the car. I'm perfect, I said, and for the first time all weekend, I meant it completely. The drive back to Seattle should have been devastating. 6 hours to process the complete destruction of my relationship with my birth family, the ugly truth about what they really thought of me, the realization that the people I'd loved most in the world saw me as a burden they'd been carrying for 27 years. Instead, it was liberating. I can't believe what I just witnessed, David said about an hour into the drive, when the shock had worn off enough for him to speak. Ashley, I am so sorry. Nothing you told me about your family prepared me for that level of cruelty. I don't think I really saw it clearly until today, I admitted, watching the familiar Ohio landscape blur past. I kept making excuses for them, assuming they meant well but just didn't understand. I never considered that they might understand perfectly and just not care. The shellfish thing. David shook his head in disbelief. That wasn't just inconsiderate. That was deliberately dangerous. They could have killed you. I know. The words should have been terrifying, but instead they felt like a revelation. They knew exactly what they were doing. It was a test to see how much I'd tolerate to keep their approval. And you failed their test beautifully, David said with a proud smile. You chose your own safety and dignity over their manipulation. That takes incredible strength. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since we'd left, but I'd turned off the sound and ignored it. Now, as we stopped for gas, I finally looked at the messages. Dozens of texts from Amanda, Dad, and even Connor, ranging from guilt trips to threats to desperate attempts at damage control. You're being incredibly selfish and childish, one from Amanda read. We opened our home to you and your boyfriend, and this is how you repay us? Your mother is heartbroken, Dad had written. I hope you're proud of yourself for destroying our family over a dinner menu. But it was Connor's message that made me laugh out loud. I drove 2 hours to see you, and you embarrassed me in front of your family. You owe me an apology. Listen to this, I said, reading Connor's text to David. He thinks you owe him an apology? David's voice was incredulous. For what, exactly? Not falling to your knees in gratitude that he showed up uninvited to your family dinner. Apparently, I'm supposed to be grateful that he participated in their little intervention. I scrolled through more messages, watching the tone shift from anger to desperation as the hours passed. They're really panicking now that I actually left. What are you going to do? David asked as we got back on the highway. Block their numbers for now, I said without hesitation. I need time to think without being bombarded with guilt trips and manipulation. That sounds healthy. You know what sounds even healthier? Using these groceries to make Thanksgiving dinner for people who actually want to spend time with me. David's face lit up. My parents would love to have us. They're just doing a quiet dinner at home, but they've been wanting to meet you for months. Are you sure? I don't want to impose, especially last minute. Ashley, my mom has been begging me to bring you home since our third date. She'll probably cry with happiness when I call to ask if we can join them." He was right. When David called his parents from the next rest stop, his mother Sarah practically squealed with delight. "Of course, bring Ashley. I've been dying to meet her. We'll set 2 more places, and she can tell us all about her design business. Dad's been following her Instagram, and he's fascinated by her work." Following my Instagram. Being fascinated by my work. Wanting to hear about my design business instead of dismissing it as a hobby. The contrast with my birth family was stark and painful. "They seem wonderful," I said as David ended the call. "They are. And they're going to love you because you're incredible, not in spite of some imaginary flaws that need fixing." We drove the rest of the way to Seattle in comfortable conversation, planning how we'd cook the Thanksgiving feast I'd originally intended for my family. David's parents lived in a cozy neighborhood near the university, and when we pulled up to their craftsman-style house with its welcoming front porch and overgrown garden, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in days. Sarah emerged before we'd even finished unloading the car, a petite woman with David's gentle eyes and an immediate warmth that enveloped me like a hug. "Ashley, I'm so happy to finally meet you," she said, embracing me without hesitation. "David talks about you constantly. We feel like we already know you." "Thank you so much for having us on such short notice," I said, genuinely grateful. "I brought groceries for Thanksgiving dinner if you're interested in cooking together." "Are you kidding? I've been stuck in a rut with the same menu for years. Show me what you brought, and let's create something amazing." David's father Tom appeared with the same easy warmth, helping us carry bags and asking thoughtful questions about my design work that showed he'd actually paid attention to my social media posts. Within an hour, I was standing in their kitchen helping Sarah prep vegetables while she told me embarrassing stories about David's childhood. "He was such a serious little boy," she said, laughing as she peeled sweet potatoes. "Always trying to fix things that weren't broken, always worried about making sure everyone was happy." "He still does that," I said, watching David and Tom assemble the dining room table with extra leaves to accommodate our feast. "It's one of my favorite things about him." "He's different since he met you," Sarah said quietly. "Lighter. More confident." We were starting to worry he'd never find someone who appreciated how special he is. "I'm the lucky one," I said, meaning every word. As we cooked together, I found myself sharing the story of what had happened with my family. Sarah listened without judgment, offering support and perspective that helped me process the trauma of the last few days. "Family isn't about blood," she said finally, as we basted the organic turkey that was turning golden brown in her oven. "It's about love, respect, and showing up for each other. You chose to show up for them, and they chose to use that against you. That says everything about their character and nothing about yours." "I feel guilty for feeling relieved," I admitted. "Shouldn't I be devastated about losing my family?" "Honey, you didn't lose your family. You escaped from people who were hurting you. There's a big difference." That evening, as we sat around the table sharing what we were grateful for, I realized I'd never felt more at home anywhere. Tom expressed gratitude for getting to meet the woman who makes our son so happy. Sarah was thankful for new friends and the chance to cook with someone who shared her love of fresh ingredients. David was grateful for my courage and strength, and for the reminder that family is something you choose. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at these people who'd welcomed me without conditions, who'd listened to my story without judgment, who'd made space for me in their lives and their traditions without a second thought. "I'm grateful for learning the difference between people who love you and people who want to control you," I said. "And I'm grateful for finding out that real family has nothing to do with sharing DNA." The next week, I sent a carefully written email to my birth family, setting clear boundaries about future contact. I explained that I was open to rebuilding our relationships if they were willing to acknowledge their behavior and commit to treating me with basic respect and consideration. I made it clear that my allergies, my career, and my relationship were not topics for debate or manipulation. Emily responded within hours, apologizing for not standing up to our parents more forcefully and asking if we could talk privately. I agreed, and we began the slow process of rebuilding our sister relationship on healthier terms. Amanda, Dad, and Connor never responded to my email. Their silence spoke volumes about their priorities and their willingness to change. Do you miss them? David asked one evening as we cuddled on our couch in Seattle, planning our next design project together. I miss the people I thought they were, I said honestly. But I don't miss walking on eggshells or feeling like I have to earn love that should be unconditional. Good, he said, kissing the top of my head. You deserve so much better than that. I know, I said, and for the first time in my life, I actually believed it. The months following our disastrous Thanksgiving were transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. What started as the worst holiday of my life became the catalyst for the most authentic, peaceful period I'd ever experienced. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse patterns. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I'd been raised in a family system where love was conditional on compliance, where my worth was tied to how little space I took up and how few needs I expressed. My allergies hadn't been seen as a medical condition requiring accommodation. They'd been framed as a character flaw that made me inconvenient and demanding. You were scapegoated, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. When a family system is dysfunctional, they often choose one member to blame for all the problems. Your allergies, your independence, your career choices, they were all just excuses to make you the problem child, so they didn't have to examine their own issues. Understanding the psychological dynamics helped, but the real healing came from building a life surrounded by people who valued me exactly as I was. David's family embraced me completely, including me in their traditions and celebrations without ever making me feel like an outsider. His mother, Sarah, and I became genuinely close, bonding over cooking and gardening and the shared experience of loving David. My design business flourished as I channeled my creative energy into work instead of trying to manage family drama. Without the constant stress of wondering what my birth family thought of my choices, I took bigger risks, pursued more ambitious projects, and built a client base that respected my artistic vision and paid me appropriately for my expertise. The most surprising development was reconnecting with Emily on our own terms. She reached out regularly, and we began building an adult sister relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. She admitted that she'd always known our parents' treatment of me was wrong, but hadn't known how to challenge it without becoming their next target. I was a coward, she said during one of our video calls. I let them abuse you because it meant they left me alone. You were surviving, I corrected. We both were. The difference is that now we're choosing to thrive instead. Emily eventually went to therapy herself and started setting boundaries with Amanda and Dad. She stopped participating in their criticism of me and refused to relay their attempts at manipulation. It was hard for her, but she said watching me choose my own happiness had inspired her to do the same. 1 year later, David proposed during our own Thanksgiving celebration with his family. He'd planned it perfectly, knowing that reclaiming the holiday that had once represented my worst nightmare would mean everything to me. As he got down on one knee in Sarah's kitchen, surrounded by the smell of turkey and the warmth of people who loved us both, I realized that my birth family's rejection had been the greatest gift they could have given me. Ashley, David said, his voice shaking with emotion, you are the strongest, most courageous person I know. You've shown me what it means to choose love over fear, authenticity over approval. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams and celebrating your incredible spirit? Through happy tears, I said yes to a future with someone who saw my allergies as a medical condition to accommodate, my career as a source of pride, and my independence as a strength to be admired. Our wedding was small and perfect, filled with chosen family and friends who'd supported us through every challenge. Emily was my maid of honor, having finally found the courage to attend despite our parents' threats to disown her for participating. David's parents walked me down the aisle, symbolically claiming me as their daughter in every way that mattered. Amanda, Dad, and Connor were not invited. They'd made no effort to apologize or change their behavior, and I'd learned that protecting my peace was more important than maintaining relationships that required me to diminish myself. "Do you ever regret cutting them off?" people sometimes asked. I regret that it took me 27 years to realize I deserved better. I always answered honestly. But I don't regret choosing my own well-being over their comfort. The business continued to grow beyond my wildest dreams. I specialized in branding for companies that prioritized sustainability and social responsibility, work that felt meaningful and aligned with my values. Several of my designs won industry awards, and I was invited to speak at conferences about building authentic brand identities. During one of these speaking engagements, I shared my story about learning to set boundaries with toxic family members. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out to share their own experiences with conditional love and family manipulation. I realized that my journey from people-pleaser to boundary setter wasn't just personal healing. It was a story that could help others recognize their own worth. I started incorporating this message into my business, working with clients who'd been told their dreams were unrealistic or their goals were selfish. I specialized in helping people build brands that reflected their authentic selves rather than what others expected them to be. "Your business is an extension of your healing," Dr. Martinez observed during one of our sessions. "You're helping other people find their voices because you found yours." 3 years after that terrible Thanksgiving, David and I hosted our own holiday dinner in our new house. We'd bought a beautiful craftsman home with a big kitchen and a dining room that could seat 12. The table was filled with friends who'd become family, colleagues who'd become close confidants, and Emily, who'd driven up from Portland with her new boyfriend who actually supported her therapy journey and encouraged her independence. As we went around the table sharing what we were grateful for, I reflected on how different my life looked from the future my birth family had tried to force me into. Instead of settling for Connor's suburban dreams and my parents' narrow definition of success, I'd built something entirely my own. A marriage based on mutual respect and shared values. A career that challenged me creatively while providing financial independence. A chosen family that celebrated my quirks instead of trying to fix them. "I'm grateful for the worst Thanksgiving of my life," I said when it was my turn to share. "Because it taught me that family isn't about obligation or blood relation. It's about showing up for each other with love, respect, and genuine care. It's about accommodation without resentment, celebration without conditions, and support without strings attached." Emily squeezed my hand across the table, her eyes bright with tears of understanding. "I'm grateful for second chances," she added, "and for sisters who model what healthy relationships look like." Later that evening, as David and I cleaned up the kitchen together, I thought about the journey from that humiliating confrontation in Amanda's kitchen to this moment of pure contentment in my own home. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. "How grateful I am that I finally learned to trust my instincts," I said. For so long, I let other people tell me what I should want, what I should value, how I should live. When I started listening to my own voice instead, everything changed. "Your instincts led you to me," he pointed out with a smile. "My instincts led me to myself," I corrected. "You just happened to be smart enough to fall in love with the real me instead of trying to change me into someone else." The final lesson from my journey was perhaps the most important. Love shouldn't require you to become smaller, quieter, or less than who you are. Real love, whether romantic, familial, or friendship, celebrates your authentic self and wants you to flourish. Anyone who demands that you dim your light to make them comfortable isn't offering love. They're offering control disguised as care. Sometimes people ask if I ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed for that seafood dinner, if I'd swallowed my pride and tried to make peace with my family's treatment. The answer is simple. I would have taught them that my boundaries were negotiable, my safety was optional, and my happiness was less important than their comfort. I would have stayed small and grateful for crumbs of conditional acceptance instead of building a feast of genuine love and respect. Walking out of that kitchen with my arms full of groceries wasn't just about taking food to people who appreciated it. It was about taking myself to people who appreciated me. It was about choosing abundance over scarcity, authenticity over approval, and my own well-being over everyone else's comfort. If you're watching this story and recognizing patterns in your own family relationships, I want you to know that you deserve unconditional love, basic respect, and consideration for your safety and well-being. You deserve people in your life who celebrate your successes instead of minimizing them, who accommodate your needs without resentment, and who see your independence as strength rather than betrayal. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you experienced the pressure to stay in toxic relationships because family is everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage to choose themselves. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about finding your authentic voice and building the life you actually want. Share this video with anyone who might need the reminder that chosen family is just as valid and valuable as biological family, and that walking away from toxicity isn't giving up on love, it's making space for healthier love to grow. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we celebrate courage, authenticity, and the radical act of choosing ourselves. I'm sending you all so much love and gratitude for your support, and I hope your own journey toward authentic relationships brings you the same peace and joy I've found. Until next time, remember that you are worthy of love that doesn't require you to earn it, compromise your safety, or become someone you're not. Trust your instincts, set your boundaries, and never apologize for taking up space in your own life.